What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today, we are going to look at the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series. I'm not going to look at every single race, obviously. I'm not going to go into details on everything. I'm just going to kind of look at the final standings. We're going to recap the final race of the year, which, I'm unlike the World Series, I'm actually happy, so things go well. We will eventually get to baseball. Don't worry. That'll be tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday. Some point this week, I will do the World Series. I do intend on going live, so that'll be fun. But anyways, without further ado, of course, I will be pulling up the NASCAR, everything with NASCAR. So I'm honestly pretty happy with how the season came down to it. I know a lot of people weren't happy with the final race of the year, but we'll get to that in due time. So, obviously, this year we have been doing NASCAR recaps, and I started this last year where during the playoffs I kind of came out and said, alright, let me go and do, bit by bit here, I'm going to recap each round of the playoffs. And those videos were successful, so I said, let's do it again. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoy being a NASCAR fan, so we'll look into it. So first thing I'll do is I'm going to start by discussing the Phoenix race, the final race of the year. Just because that way there we at least can discuss how the race went. So this race was exciting to an extent. Obviously, when it's the final race of the year, it's always going to be exciting. Now, obviously, how it went depends on which manufacturer you support. So right off the bat, we kind of knew it was going to be a clean race, but there was going to be a lot of aggression at the end. I watched the end of the truck race. I watched the Xfinity race. So I saw what happened. First things first, though, congratulations, Zane Smith Truck Series. I was rooting for him the whole year. Very happy to see him win. Obviously, not the biggest fan of Ty Gibbs here, but I was not rooting for him to win. But unfortunately, his father did pass away after he won the championship. So I am happy that Ty Gibbs and his dad at least got to celebrate the championship together. So my condolences to the Gibbs family, of course. Very sad, but so now we'll talk about how the Phoenix race went for the Cup Series. So your final four teams, the drivers, teams, however you want to look at it, were, of course, driving the one car, Ross Chastain, driving the car, Christopher Bell, and driving the 22 car, Joey Logano. Now, Phoenix is a track that Logano has showed a lot of promise at, Elliott has showed a lot of promise at, and Chastain has had his moments at. Bell was kind of the wild card. Nobody really knew how he was going to do in Phoenix. He has not put the best numbers together in Phoenix, but he also hasn't been abysmal. So anyway, going into the race here, we saw a lot of these drivers have issues. We saw Landon Castle wreck, whatever, no surprise. Brad Keselowski's car blew up under TV caution, so that's always fun. All of a sudden, the car just caught on fire, and you just see him leaving the car. Thankfully, he's okay. Alex Bowman got collected in a wreck, and it was very unfortunate because it was essentially Michael McDowell just kind of getting loose and running into him and wrecking him. Every other driver outside of Keselowski and Castle was able to finish the race, but it was a very unceremonious end to Bowman and his crew chief's tenure. His crew chief, of course, Greg Ives, is retiring now. So I'm happy for Greg Ives. He spent his whole life at this point working as a crew chief. So it's exciting to see him move on, actually get to focus on his children. He hasn't really been there for his kids. So it's going to be good for them and him, his wife, of course. She's gone through a lot, obviously, because being a crew chief in NASCAR is not a, oh yeah, you have a 3-month off-season, but off-season isn't really an off-season when you're a crew chief. You still have a lot of work to do. You still have to work with your drivers. So, it's good for him. Too bad that he wasn't able to finish the race, but at least he got Bowman with him. At least Bowman was able to return for the race from his concussion, so that's a positive. Now, for the playoff drivers, everyone was running up front for a while. Joey Logano had won the pole, and his teammate Ryan Blaney was second. So basically what had happened was the first stage was very non-competitive. Logano dominated the whole stage. He was just in first place the whole time. And Blaney was kind of serving as a bit of an enforcer for him. So there was a moment where Corey LaJoie kind of gave Logano a headache to pass him. So Blaney catches up to LaJoie, and he kind of pushes into LaJoie. And it kind of shows, don't mess with Logano or I will wreck you. Now, was that intentional? I don't know. I'm not listening to Blaney's radio, but it made me happy. It made me say, cool, maybe Blaney, I should respect him a little bit more. So we get to stage 2, and it's pretty much the same thing. Logano and Blaney dominating the race. Nobody in the championship 4 outside of Logano is even sniffing the top. Chase Briscoe is starting to kind of make some noise. Kevin Harvick's moving up, but still, no one's really able to do much. Now, in the 3rd stage, this is where things started to get interesting. So, there was a restart where Logano, Bell, or at least Bell was a little bit, I think he was ahead of them all, but Logano, Chastain, and Elliott were all near each other. So this is like the first time Logano's not out front. So there was always going to be some concerns, and I'm watching Logano trying to figure out what's going to happen. And what happens is Logano's on the outside, Chastain is on the inside, Elliott's right in front of Chastain. So Elliott and Chastain, they both try to go very low, and Elliott, being Chase Elliott, thinks he's better than everyone else, so he tries to dive bomb in front of Chastain and expects Chastain to give. But when you're racing for the championship, you do not give. So what ends up happening is Elliott ends up wrecking himself, essentially. Chastain kind of pushes Elliott. Elliott hits the wall, and while Elliott was able to return to the field, he only ended up a lap down at that point, 2 laps down at that point. There was damage to his car. His rear axle was bent. And while they were able to fix it, his car was not running at 100%. He was going a couple seconds slower per lap than the leaders. So he was not going to be a real contender for the rest of the race. Now, the fans were heartbroken. But going on NASCAR Twitter was kind of fun because it's kind of like, all right, how do the fans feel about this? Are they going to be mad? Are they going to be saying it's Elliott's fault? As expected, Twitter was divided. The people who like Elliott were defending him and saying, Chastain should be suspended, Chastain cheated, Chastain wrecked his only competitor. The people who don't like Elliott were saying, he didn't do anything wrong. Chastain was just driving. Elliott would do the same thing. Every single driver would do the same thing. Anyway, this ended Elliott's chances of becoming the champion to an extent because he would have needed the other 3 drivers to have huge issues. So, a little bit later, Logano ends up getting back up front. Christopher Bell continues to carve his way through the cars, and Bell starts to have a real threat. Bell's starting to look like the real threat to Logano. There's a caution, and the 2 of them go to pits, and Christopher Bell has a horrible pit. So something like Logano's pit stop was 10.3 seconds, Chastain's was 10.6, 10.7 seconds, Christopher Bell's was 19.8 seconds. Now, what happened is the rear tire changer, he ended up getting his finger caught somehow in something. I don't know if it was the tire, the axle, something. But regardless, his finger gets caught, and he eventually has to, get his finger out. And he's able to finish it, but it slowed them by about 10 seconds. And this really hurt them. And they also had a problem on the other side of the car, too. So they were already a second or so behind. And this really hurt Christopher Bell, put him on the outside. And his car was having issues. He had been complaining about some engine issues. Now, the engine issues kind of went away after he ran the car a little bit, but it was still concerning. So Christopher Bell was really kind of like the outsider looking in. But at this point, Chastain's starting to carve his way up, and he's moving through the rankings. So we get towards the end, and Elliott's a couple laps down. He finishes 20th place. He's the only competitor of the Big Four that did not make it was not on the lead lap. So now, Christopher Bell, due to all his issues, and this came at the very end, he does finish 10th place. So he does not win the championship, but he definitely had a lot of upside. Really strong season for Christopher Bell. There were some rumblings before he won at New Hampshire this year that if he did not have a solid end of the year, he could be kicked out of the 20 car. Because Joe Gibbs usually will not hold on to young drivers if they don't live up to their potential. Case in point, Joey Logano, Erik Jones. They didn't live up to their true potential with Joe Gibbs, so Joe Gibbs said, all right, we'll move on from you, we'll go elsewhere. So Christopher Bell had a lot to prove. He wins at New Hampshire, and then he has a great playoff run. We'll get to discussing him in a minute, but it was a good run for him. So now you get to the top 2. So at this point, it's Chastain versus Logano, and the Fords were dominating this whole race. So you kind of, as a Logano fan, I'm kind of holding my breath saying, as long as Logano doesn't have issues, he should win this race. Fingers crossed. I'm just holding my breath, hoping beyond hope that everything goes right, because I love Joey Logano. I had my Logano shirt on. I'm watching the race. Had my heartbreak from the Phillies losing the World Series the night before. I'm just like, all right, come on, Logano, you got this. So we get to this point where nearing the end of the race, Chastain has the fastest car, and he's gaining about 0.2 of a second per lap. But he's about 2 seconds behind Logano with not a lot of time to go, with only about 8 laps to go. So he has to get he has to have something happen. He has to have a caution come out. Because, well, yes, on paper he had the chance to pass him. The issue was Ryan Blaney was not going to bend over and allow Chastain to pass him. Ryan Blaney was going to give him a headache to pass him, because Blaney thought he had the shot to win. And so what happens is we get to the final lap of the race, and at this point I have Logano's radio on. I'm listening, I'm watching the TV, and they're saying, for a long time they're not talking about Chastain. Once you get to the final couple laps, they're like, all right, Ross is ganging on you, but there's still the 12. There's still about 4 car lengths between him and the 12, so you'll be okay. The 12's Blaney. What ends up happening is Chastain doesn't have enough time. No caution comes out. Once you get to the final lap, I'm standing up. I'm kind of like, come on, no cautions. Well, actually, a caution wouldn't have mattered at that point. I'm just kind of saying, don't wreck yourself, Logano. That's all you got to do. Stay clean, stay out there. He keeps going, and he wins the race. Ryan Blaney was catching up to him, but it wouldn't have mattered. Even if Blaney had passed him and won the race, it would not have mattered. Chastain was the only one he had to worry about. Joey Logano is the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series champion, and I was so excited. Great showing for the other 3 drivers, well, specifically Bell and Chastain, but so excited. Logano dominated the race and helped Ford take 2 of the 3 titles. I am a Ford fan, so extremely excited to see the win for Logano. I was so happy for Joey Logano. He's just such a great driver, and I know a lot of people hate him, and I understand the hate for Joey Logano because he is an aggressive driver, but, I mean, Chase Elliott's an aggressive driver, and people love him, so I don't understand. It's probably just because of the last name, But great season for Joey Logano. Was he the best driver all season? No. Was he the most consistent driver all season? Not really. But in the end, he won when it mattered. He won that big race in Las Vegas, so he was able to focus 2 weeks on the championship and that's crucial. That's crucial. You don't have to worry about adapting for 2 tracks. You only have to worry about Phoenix. Ryan Logano's team, because they're all in it together. The championship, the manufacturer's championship went to Penske. As a result, we all know the Ryan Blaney team gets some money from that, because that's money that goes to the team. He's on the team. That's huge. So they want to work with him. Blaney would have loved to win the race, but it wouldn't have helped him. It would have just been a race win, but still interesting. Now, after the race, Logano, of course, full of emotions. Great win, 2022 Cup Series champion, just like 2018. So I will indeed be happy to get those pictures of him. I'm excited to get the die cast of him for being the 2022 Cup Series champion. Probably get a larger one. Like I said, eventually I will show off my die cast collection, but there's still some big cars I'm waiting for, and of course Logano will be the big one. There's a car I'm waiting for from a driver I don't necessarily like that I definitely want to have, because I have a story behind why I got that car. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, so all said and done, with the season over, the final standings have Joey Logano as your winner. He won the 2022 Cup Series championship, and Logano's season was great. Now, like I said, was he the most consistent driver all season? No. Was he the most dominant driver all season? No. But he won races when it mattered, and he dominated at the tracks he was supposed to dominate at. So that's what you want when you're Joey Logano. As a Logano fan, that's exactly what I was hoping for. I wanted him to race well at certain tracks. He did just that. So it was great. It was exactly what you wanted. So I'm just kind of like holding my breath, and Logano comes out on top. It's exactly what you wanted for Joey Logano. As a Ford fan, as a Logano fan, it's exactly what I wanted to see happen. So It was a great season for him. Ross Chastain finishes second. Now, Chastain said it himself. When you went to February, who had the number one car finishing runner-up in the season? Nobody. Maybe Ross Chastain himself did. But nobody thought Chastain was going to finish top 3. No one thought Chastain was going to finish top 5, top 8. Keep going. Chastain was expected maybe to be like a borderline playoff driver. Maybe sneak in on points. Maybe steal a win somewhere. But he had such a strong season. He was so consistent at the end. I mean, you look at him. He had those last couple races. He finished second, fourth, third. Second, fifth, third. So he was definitely consistent. He's a real threat. That's a young team that has a fraction of the money that these other teams have, like Penske, Joe Gibbs Racing, Hendrick Motorsports. So the sky's the limit for these guys. Ross Chastain is definitely a dark horse to watch out for in the future. The fact that, like I said, his Trackhouse Racing team was up against those big teams in the championship shows that he is a real competitor. And I love to shout out to all the watermelons across the U.S. You got to give them credit for that. Anyways, Christopher Bell finishes third in the points. Now, this is all because of the final race, so take it what you will. Bell had an interesting season. Obviously, he wasn't the best driver in the regular season, and a lot of people had him maybe getting eliminated in the round of 16. He had made the playoffs because he won the one race at New Hampshire that I went to. There are some videos from there. I loved going to that race. I love going to New Hampshire. It was exciting to watch Bell win that race, so I enjoyed that race. I enjoyed watching Bell win. Logano was up front for a lot of that race, too. So I got to see Kurt Busch in his probable final race. So, but Bell, I mean, this is a guy like I was saying before. Bell had a lot of concerns heading into the year, and a lot of people were saying, they might not keep him if he doesn't succeed. We've seen Joe Gibbs Racing move on from young drivers if they didn't live up to their expectations. I mean, they literally kicked Erik Jones out of the car to get Bell the spot because Jones didn't have a strong season. I think he was 20. I don't remember if he was there at 2018, but I know he was 2019, 2020. So it is worth noting. And of course, Ty Gibbs is now getting called up to the Cup Series. So that's big for him. He deserves a spot, but which car is he going to? That's the question. Do you move Christopher Bell from the 20 to the 18? That's a question. But great season for Christopher Bell. Nobody really saw him making it this far. And, I mean, like Chastain, if you would have told me Christopher Bell is finishing in the top 4, I would have been shocked entering the year. Entering the playoffs, same thing. I probably thought he was going to miss out. I probably was looking at him as maybe a first-round loss, maybe make it to the round of 12, but good showing for him. Chase Elliott, to me, I thought he was going to win the championship this year for the whole year, and Elliott had an interesting season. He was hot, then he was ice cold, then he was red hot, then he got cold at the end of the year. So, you listen to his end-of-season interview, and he didn't blame Chastain for what happened, so he knows he was at fault. He knows, I shouldn't have done what I did. I was expecting him to give. He didn't give. It's a championship. I wouldn't have done that. But he was being a little bit of a baby when he was doing it, so, I mean, I get it. Emotions run high. I probably would be the same way, but he was expected to win. He didn't. It is what it is. Elliott, though, 4th place. He made the championship 4. Strong season for him. Happy for him, I guess. Happy that he finished the lowest of the 4. How's that? Now, 5th place, Denny Hamlin. And I'm not going to go and discuss every single driver based on their points, but I am going to discuss a lot of them. So, 5th place was Denny Hamlin. Hamlin was a strong driver this year. He was a bit of a letdown for most of the season up until this, I think it was July when he actually started to heat up, won a couple races. But Hamlin, I mean, he was a video game move away from making the championship 4, but he wasn't really a factor in Phoenix, so I don't necessarily how it would have been had he made the Final 4 instead of Chastain. It might not have the race would have been even more boring, so to speak. So, we'll see. Still a strong season for Hamlin. The question for him is how long will he remain at his team? I know that he, of course, is under contract to remain with Joe Gibbs Racing, but there will be a point where he moves on from the team because he does have his own team, 2311. So we'll see what happens. William Byron finishes 6th. Byron, similar to Hamlin, was a streaky driver this year. He has his races where he was dominating. Unlike Hamlin, though, Byron was hot at the beginning of the year, then he got cold. The fact that he made it to the round of 8 was surprising to me, but it's good for him. I don't like Byron that much. To me, he's a bit of a daddy's boy. Like, his dad got him the job, so it is what it is. Byron will remain at Hendrick Motorsports for a while now. There were a lot of questions with him at the beginning of the year when he was cold. I know I just said that he was hot, but he wasn't. When he was struggling at the beginning of the year, there were a lot of questions about, is he going to be cut? Are they going to get rid of him? So he did put some of those questions to rest, but how much? That's the real question. Kyle Larson finishes 7th. Not the runner-up season, not the follow-up season to his championship win last year that he was wanting, expecting. But Larson, I mean, he had a good year. He was still alive in the owner championship last week or yesterday. Had he won the race at Phoenix, Hendrick Motorsports would have won. But it is what it is. I mean, he was competitive. He just had a bad stretch in the round of 12. Unfortunately for him, he ended up going home then. So Larson, still one of the best drivers in the race, in NASCAR. Exciting to watch him race. He's definitely a very polarizing driver, but he will be one of the faces of NASCAR for the next decade. Ryan Blaney actually finishes 8th in the standings, and this is a little bit of a surprise, seeing as he didn't win a single race this year, but it shows you that he's been very consistent this year. I mean, he made the playoffs, he made it to the round of 8, despite not winning a single race. He was constantly running up front. He was always finishing just short. I mean, he had at least 3-4 second place finishes this year. So it's a little bit of a heartbreak. I mean, he lost in Talladega to Chase Elliott in the round of 12. Barely. He lost the Daytona 500 to his teammate. Barely. He didn't finish second that race, actually. But it's just, he came in second in Phoenix this year. So great season for him. There's a lot to build on. Not my favorite driver from Penske. Not my favorite driver. One of my least favorite 4 drivers. But we'll see what happens. Chase Briscoe finishes 9th. Now, if I'm a fan of Stewart-Haas Racing, which is the team he races for, I'm excited. He's not the driver I expected to have a great year for that team, but it's good. Young driver, talented driver. He has a lot of potential for the next couple years. There's going to probably be some regression, but he showed a lot of building. He showed that he's definitely a talented driver, and he's definitely a contender for years to come. But he is inconsistent, so he needs to start building on tracks that he isn't the best at. Daniel Suarez finished 10th, so just like Ross Chastain, who finished 2nd, his teammate was a bit of an afterthought in the playoffs. Actually made it to the round of 12, so it was exciting for him. And he had his one race win at Sonoma, and it was exciting. I had actually just gotten a diecast of him right before that race win, so pretty cool. Suarez is a guy who, he's a hard worker. He unfortunately didn't pan out with his first team or second team, but he seems to be a great fit for Trackhouse, so I'm excited to watch him work. And he definitely has upside. He has potential. And it's cool to have a driver who is Mexican-American in the league. He definitely, he's a hard worker. And it's going to be nice to watch him drive for a few more years at minimum. Still, strong season for him, though. He finishes top 10. Austin Dillon finished 11th. Now that we're outside the top 10, I'm only going to briefly discuss these guys. Austin Dillon, 11th. He got his win in Daytona. Barely made the playoffs because of it, and didn't do anything in the playoffs. Not the best season for him, but whatever. Austin Cindric, 12th. Love Cindric. Cindric got his win at the Daytona 500. Could have had a shot to win in Daytona the second time around, but obviously Austin Dillon pushed him out of the way. Made it to the round of 12. Strong season for him. Nobody saw that. He was the Rookie of the Year. He did win the Rookie of the Year award. So there's a lot of potential for him. I think Cindric's the type of guy who, now that he has a year under his belt, he's probably going to be a competitor for 2024. I think next year he's still going to have some problems. I think 2024 will be his year where he's going to start becoming the face of Team Penske. But we will see. We will see. Um, After him, Kyle Busch finishes 13th. Kyle Busch's final year with Joe Gibbs Racing, he will be joining a RCR, Richard Childress Racing, after the year. So it's kind of an end of an era for him. All he's done, he's been such a talented driver for years with Joe Gibbs Racing. It's going to be so weird having another driver in the 18 car. M&M's, of course, is gone now, so it's heartbreaking. It sucks that we lose M&M's, but you know, Kyle Busch is a very polarizing driver. He had an interesting year. The fact that he got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs was a shock to me. I still can't believe that. But he didn't do much outside of it. He really was a inconsistent driver for most of the season. At the end of the year, he just got cold, and it was clear that he had checked out with Joe Gibbs Racing. So good luck to him in his future endeavors at RCR. Tyler Reddick is the guy who actually is leaving RCR. So he finishes 14th right behind Busch. Reddick had a very strong season this year. He was very consistent. He won at least 3, maybe 4 races on the year. So I'm surprised that he finished this far down in the point standings, but he didn't make it far in the playoffs. He was a first-round exit, just like Kyle Busch. So it's going to be exciting to see how he does in 23-11 next year. Tyler Reddick, though, good driver. I'm excited to see how he can do, like I said, in a Toyota on a better team. Kevin Harvick finishes 15th. Storehouse Racing legend, probably going to retire after the 2023 season, if I had to guess. He's one of the most vocal drivers right now with certain issues that the cars are having. He's always complaining about things with NASCAR because he doesn't care anymore. He's like, well, who do I have to prove? I've already won. So it's exciting to see Kevin Harvick, but like I said, I feel like next year will be his last season, so we'll see. I think that will be Chase Briscoe's team. I do think that there's a chance that someone like Ryan Preece will take a spot on Storehouse Racing next year. Fingers crossed. I'd love to see that. But Kevin Harvick, solid year. Very garbage at the start of the year. Won those 2 races, 2 of the final 3 races before the playoffs started. Had a lot of momentum, but first round loss, first round exit is what it is. Alex Bowman, 16th. Had the 1 win in... Oh, gosh. Might have been Las Vegas. I don't remember. It was the 3rd race of the year. But after that, he was consistent to start the year. Then he just got ice cold, horribly cold, consistently qualified near the bottom, was getting collected in a ton of wrecks. So, I mean, not the best season for him. He honestly has to have a good year in 2023, or he will be gone from Hendrick Motorsports. Martin Truex Jr. finished 17th. He, to me, just like Kevin Harvick, I think this is his last year racing. I think both Harvick and Truex Jr. retire after the 2023 season. He's having fun racing, but it wasn't a good year for him. He has some of the best equipment in the league. He's on one of the better teams in the league. Didn't have a great year, so all eyes are on him. There were rumors that had Kyle Busch not left, he would have been forced to retire or, kicked out of his contract from Joe Gibbs Racing. For Ty Gibbs, we'll see. Erik Jones, 18th. Very surprising year for him. Going to be exciting to see what happens with that team. Of note, Jimmie Johnson will be racing some races for that team next year. He will be coming back. It was announced that Jimmie Johnson will be back for part-time schedule. So I want to see if Erik Jones can work well with Jimmie Johnson, and having 2 of the best drivers in history with Richard Petty and Jimmie Johnson kind of coaching you. It's going to be intriguing to watch how Erik Jones does. Bubba Wallace finished 19th on the season. Technically he finished 19th. It's the 45 car on these rankings. I'm not sure how they rank it, but regardless, Bubba Wallace 19th. He did have his win this year. Bubba Wallace, one of the most polarizing drivers in NASCAR, so strong year for him. He's on one of the better teams. He needs to get a win earlier in the season, so that way there you can actually kind of put yourself in a situation where you can compete in the playoffs for something rather than just racing to race. But, I mean, still, Wallace, strong year for him. He was hot at the end of the year. I kind of want to see if Wallace can compete hot the whole year, how he does. Aric Almirola rounds out the top 20. Consistent, inconsistent. He had announced that he was going to retire but then he kind of was coerced to come back for the 2023 season. I do think he retires after 2023, so I think he, Truex, and Harvick all kind of ride out into the